Now, I'm sure all of you recognise the building on the screen there. Parliament House, perched on the top of one of our, if not the most prominent hill in Canberra, and an absolute focal point of our capital. But let me tell you the building that was meant to be there. Our two designers had set out and wanted to use that hill as the heart of their design. They wanted to put a building that looked very different, but also its function was also quite different. They set out for this building on the top of the hill to be a pretty magical and symbolic public place. It was meant to be part museum, part event space, but it was a space that was meant to be celebratory of the people, like a gathering space that anyone could access, but especially celebratory of the achievements of citizens, to go there, feel inspired, to gather. Now, most of you may know that the origins of the word democracy is power of the people. The designers of Canberra set out for this building specifically to be a symbol of democracy. Deliberately, strategically, this building was above Parliament House, which is exactly why old Parliament House is where it is today. They wanted this building to be a reminder. Whenever you were driving around Canberra, you'd see this building and think, wow, we've got the people above politics. Powerful stuff. But unfortunately, the same politician or group of politicians who outlawed alcohol in the ACT decided it was their spot on the top of the hill. So unfortunately for all of us, I feel, we ended up with politics above the people, which I feel was a massive, massive shame and a lost opportunity. Because individuals, societies, and cultures are directly shaped by the environments they're in. So design is vital. This has been a topic that's always fascinated me. I think the idea of how an individual might be shaped by their environment is abstract, but you can see it regardless of the city you're in. More than 10 years ago, I really wanted to have this sort of experience and experiment firsthand. I set out on a quest to investigate what it would be like if I just spent 20 days and 20 nights in confined public space. So spending time of 20 days and 20 nights just in the public spaces of Sydney. A little bit extreme. But what I wanted to do is see how that would change my lens. It certainly wasn't about homelessness. I had a wallet full of cash, a roll mat, I had supplies, I had a camera. I was out there interviewing urban planning experts. I was doing some fun little experiments, to really dig deep on this. But of course it did have the element that put me in some vulnerable spots of sleeping rough. And so I was out there on this one occasion. It was night 17 of 20. And I was woken up at 3 a.m. I was in Circular Quay, had a little roll mat tucked away. And a security guard woke me up at 3 a.m., looked down at me, and told me that there was a group of people going around causing trouble for people sleeping rough. So you can imagine being there, right? I've already been having a couple of rough nights. I've already been out there for a little while. But to be woken up and actually having a threat to my physical safety, the fact that it was unexpected. Of course, I gathered up, looked up, said thank you. Gathered my things, and potentially because it was cold and it was dark, I started walking around. And for the first time in the entire experiment, I felt the experience of this huge city. And I was tiny. Here I was looking for a safe place to sleep. So with this feeling of sort of loneliness and an absolute separation from anyone else. I walked around, but then something massive happened, and it was pretty unexpected. I discovered in Circular Quay this very small and modest light installation. There were, at the time, pink and white streams of light. Again, it was modest, but I stepped up to it. I reached out to it. And what I discovered was, importantly, it was interactive. So of course, thinking back to it, there were most likely cameras and sensors picking up my movements, right? But suddenly the whole experience shifted. My sense of my role in the city shifted. It was interactive, so there was a sense of play. It moved when I touched it. It changed colors when I touched it. Suddenly, I was in a dialogue, a relationship, right? I was brought back. I felt warm and safe. And I think it was because of that central feeling of autonomy. I could change something about my experience. And so for any of you in the crowd thinking about doing this yourself, getting your sleeping mat and roll mat and heading out onto the streets of Canberra, for context, here's a little photo of me by the end of it. So my wife actually thinks I look younger now than 10 years ago. But anyway, the experience stuck. That insight stuck more than anything else. We can all forget that image. Trying to separate myself from the experience. But in essence, the experience did stick, and that insight stuck. It's like, wow, there's something in that, right? And so 10 years later, and many, many experiments later, I thought, how can we reuse that and scale that? What is that in that that's actually usable to, say, people in the room? And so what we've done is set up an organization called the Microforest Collective. Microforests are small, dense urban forests, only about 30 by 40 meters in size. So not huge, right? But they're designed to pop into those urban public parks that are currently being underutilized. Their number one goal is to cool the environment because of the dense plantings, countering urban heat, which is a rising problem globally. Also, though, our process in terms of how our role facilitating those microforests and their construction is they're co-designed, so the community get to decide what's in them. Potentially more critically, though, they're crowd-funded and locally led. This means that governments don't have to pay for them. You can imagine their response if they're bleeding red, in deficits, or at least budget strained, and the community come to them and say, hey, let's build a microforest. Don't worry, we're going to do it. It's a warm reception. So we've now built 5 collectively microforests, 4 in the ACT, and we're looking to scale it national. But the only reason I'm bringing this up is an example. Some people, though, hear microforest and think that's pretty abstract. So let me paint you a picture. If I was to have a photo of a before photo of one of the parks, of course, you'd probably see a park that you're often driving by or walking past pretty quickly in one of your streets or neighborhoods. Underutilized, potentially an eyesore, and clearly not loved enough. The after photo, though, you'd see dense plantings, trees, 5 meters tall, kids playing in the dry creek bed that's now filled up because it's rained. You'd see sneak tracks between the trees that have been designed and implemented for kids to play in, sense of play, nature play. You'd see older people meditating, reading. You'd see potentially quarterly working bees getting on top of those weeds. But also, more joyfully, even just other community events. So you could say, Mitch, I see what you guys have done. Good stuff, power to you. I think potentially a developer or the local council could get that done in a week. Or less, probably. And you might be right. But the magic of what we're doing here is all the things you don't see in that after photo. The 18 months that it takes us from working and finding a local leader, onboarding them, letting them know what it takes, helping them form a team, site selection, approvals, crowdfunding, co-design, planting, 18 months. But guess what happens in that time? What you wouldn't see in that after photo is the introductions that have taken place between neighbours. You'd see the increased trust between neighbours. You'd see a sense of buy-in to that space, and you'd also see a sense of ownership. Suddenly it's theirs, right? They don't need to own it, but they own it. That's pretty powerful. And we've already been seeing that. We've got many stories that capture that. There's one, though. There was a 4-year-old, let's call her Steph, who participated in one of the co-design processes for one of the ACT microforests. Part of that exercise was to build out of Play-Doh what the microforest could look like with her and her peers. Fun. Imaginative, future-focused, and of course part of the solution. But then she also participated in the planting day. 3 years later, she visited with her mum. She stood in front of the plants or trees that she planted, now massive, 5 meters tall, and here's a 7-year-old called Steph. Wow. She turned around to her mum and said, "Mum, I planted this. I created this. This is here because of me." Just imagine that worldview suddenly. Imagine that experience. What an empowered 7-year-old. Just imagine how Steph might be then seeing the rest of the world, seeing other public spaces, or even just reminded of when she walks past that park. Wow. But this movement of community-driven property development, because that's essentially what we're doing, facilitating the general public to enable them to develop public land, this movement, of course, isn't limited to just microforests. Now, these photos were uploaded onto Reddit, Canberra's subreddit, just 2 weeks ago. You can actually look them up. And the essence of the commentary was, this was someone visiting Canberra, and they said, "Wow, guys, check out our capital. Check out how dreary and bleak their CBD is. Is this the best Australia's capital can be? Is this the best that we can do?" And with fairness, probably this person didn't visit the other cultural pockets that do exist around Canberra. But I think this perspective is worth considering, especially when thinking back to the aspirations of the designers of Canberra. Creative, inspirational, symbol for democracy, an inspiration for the rest of the country. And in fairness to the ACT government placemaking team, most of them, if not all of them, are competent, passionate, and very good at what they do. They're really driven people. But is there something that we can learn from the success of our microforests and reapply it in new ways to other urban spots, like lanes, parkways, car parks, or other streets? Is there something that we can use a similar model in other potential private organizations or groups set up and facilitate the general public to be part of that process? Because imagine if it was easy and fun for you to make enhancements in this city, and the changes that you made it feel more like home. If you find that appealing, join me. Imagine walking around your neighborhood and seeing your ideas and actions implemented, and then also seeing others enjoy them too. If you find that exciting, join me. Imagine working and trusting your neighbors through the process of doing some of these projects. And just imagine that increased trust. What's the impact of that alone on the rest of society? If you want to be a part of that, join me. Because regardless of what some politicians decided to prioritize and build on the top of our hill, it's not too late for people power to be a defining characteristic of Canberra. What I've been realizing and learning, especially over the last 10 years, that I now know to be true, is that we can transform Australia by doing it one tree, one street, and one city at a time.